With this, ladies and gentlemen, we step into the second professional session. I would now request the moderator and speakers of professional session 2 to join us on stage. We have a remarkable lineup, ladies and gentlemen. Captain Mark Blaine, Mr. Kiruja Misheni, who is going to join us online, Ms. Manpui Saivi, and Rear Admiral Surya Viranto. To moderate this session, we are honored to have Rear Admiral Kunal Singh Rajkumar, VSM, Joint Secretary, Navy and Defense Staff, Department of Military Affairs. I request us moderators and speakers to kindly join us on stage, and while they do so, please join me in giving them a big hand, ladies and gentlemen. As we have the session chair on stage now, sir, I hand over the proceedings to you. So the floor is yours. You may begin the proceedings.
Can you hear me all? Okay. Admiral Karambir Singh, Chairman NMF, former Chief of the Naval Staff, Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, Director General NMF, present and retired flag officers, ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, especially the younger audience behind, and my distinguished fellow panelists. Good morning, everyone. Let me begin by thanking NMF to give me this opportunity to moderate this session on strengthening the Africa Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050, which we'll refer to as AIMS 2050. I'll keep my brief very simple and basic, and I'm happy to do that because there is a lot of young audience here. And I begin by sharing a fact which at least I found amazing. And what you see on the screen is a cell called mitochondria. What does mitochondria have to do with the session? Well, mitochondria are membrane-bound cell organelles. Organelles are a specialized subunit within a cell that generates most of the chemical energy needed by us to power biomechanical reactions. The point is that if mitochondria stops working, cells die, we die. And now I refer to the renowned physician, biologist, Pulitzer Prize-winning author, Siddharth Mukherjee, who wrote the book, The Gene and Intimate History. And he says, and it is a scientific fact, that all humans, male or female, inherit their mitochondria from their mothers. It is the woman, not the man, who carries the mitochondrial genomes of all future descendants in her cells. He goes on to say that, and science states that, our mitochondrial lineage can be traced, as you can see the black figure going up, to a single human female who existed in Africa about 200,000 years ago. She is the common mother of our species. We do not know, he says, we do not know what she looks like, although her closest modern-day relatives are women of the San tribe from Botswana or Namibia. Mukherjee says, and I completely agree, that the idea of such a founding mother is endlessly mesmerizing. In human genetics, she is known by a beautiful name, the mitochondrial Eve. This astounding scientific fact, which I read a few years ago, strikes a deep reverential chord when this thematic session is about the mother continent, to strengthen Africa's Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050. So now I'll come to the core topic. Please allow me to cover some basics. Basics are always a wonderful way to begin with. So Africa is the second largest continent, covering 1/5 of the total surface area of the Earth. She is bound by the seas on all sides, as you can see. The total land area is 30.36 million square kilometers, and the continent measures 8,000 kilometers north to south, 7,400 kilometers east to west. Africa has 54 countries. Mind the number, it's a very large number. These are the 54 member states of the UN, which is the highest for any continent. 38 of them are coastal or island states, and the remaining 16 are landlocked, which to begin with at least is a disadvantage because you don't have access to global waterways. It's not an enduring disadvantage, but to begin with. And I thought at that stage, let me just contextualize it with some other union. Africa Union has 55 countries. And European Union came to the mind, and we keep hearing this, at least I have heard, that it's difficult to get a decision quickly from the European Union because it is, after all, a number of 27 countries getting together to get their consensus done. And look at Africa. She presents a far more complex scenario, 3 times larger than the continent of Europe. Africa Union has 55 countries, 54 member states, but 55 because I believe the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic is also included. But if I'm wrong, please pardon me for that. Compared to 27 in the EU, Africa has a significantly larger and younger population compared to the EU. And EU's population is roughly half of, Europe's population is roughly half of Africa. Africa is exceptionally diverse linguistically, more than 2,000 distinct languages, representing nearly 1/3 of all languages spoken worldwide. And of course, ethnic and cultural groups as shown on the slide. Africa has a variety of ecosystems. Look at it, deserts, rainforests, savannas, alpine highlands, whereas Europe has primarily a temperate climate and lacks the diversity. It has diversity, but not as much. And overall, the economic development is far more uniform and mature in the EU compared to Africa. So, we get to the point, basically, that it is a difficult continent, and getting together an integrated strategy spanning all 54 countries and not to lose the landlocked countries within itself would be a challenge. But look at the potential of Africa, and this is now quickly shown on the screen. You can go from the 12 o'clock position, 1.5 billion people. Median age is very low, 19.3 years. Now, that's a huge demographic dividend potential. 30% of global mineral reserves, 8% of natural gas, 12% of the world's oil, 40% of the world's gold, 90% of the world's chromium and platinum, approximately half of the world's reserves of cobalt, and 60% of manganese. 65% of the African arable land is not cultivated, and this is something that the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister himself pointed out where we can help. 10% of renewable fresh water is in Africa, and 60% of the world's best solar resources is there in Africa. On the maritime front, 30,500 kilometer coastline. I think I'm wrong. There are some figures that state much more, but nonetheless, it's a figure to say it's a huge coastline, not as indented as Europe's, but a huge one, an EEZ of 13 million square kilometers. And we all know how much of unexplored wealth is lying on the sea, the subsea, and the subsoil. We also had Admiral Ashok Kumar talking about how IUU fishing has been endemic to the problems of Africa in particular. Now let's come to AIMS. This has been touched upon previously. AIMS was envisioned to be a forward-looking blueprint with an overarching vision as shown on the screen to foster increased wealth creation from Africa's oceans and seas by developing a sustainable, thriving blue economy in a secure and environmentally sustainable manner. What makes the AIM strategy distinctive is its integrated approach that touches upon 3 key dimensions, that is the security, governance, and development. And this brings me to the 12 strategic objectives that AIM Strategy 2050 brought out. These are shown on the screen. You can have a quick look at that, please. Synergy and coherence, maritime awareness, environment protection, and others. And that brought me to the IPOI, which has got the 7 pillars as shown. The small insets in blue are the one that the IPRD has already covered. And I found complete congruence in the strategic objectives of AIM strategy with what the IPOI is trying to achieve. And therefore, this congruence of strategic thought and intent is a good thing. But when I did an open source background check, since the release of the strategy, AIM strategy in 2012, I noted that there was progress on some of the areas which is marked in a green tick, some partially, but many others had not progressed adequately. But for that, I have the the distinguished panelists who will explore this topic and give us insights, recommendations that we can take forward, while I give you just just a little time to go through what's on the screen. I just draw your attention to the bottom, say the Combined Exclusive Maritime Zone of Africa, the Department of Maritime Affairs, Integrated Maritime HR Strategy. A number of these initiatives are there. The blueprint is fantastic. It's the delivery part of it which is being worked upon. So quickly over to my fellow panelists. We will have first Captain Mark Blaine from the Stellenbosch University of South Africa. He will take us through the Africa Union and how the AIM strategy links with the AU. He will also cover aspects related to the Southern African Development Community and South African views, focusing on the Western Indian Ocean. Mr. Kuraja Misheni, I think, is joining us online. He will cover the part from the Maritime Safety Division that he belongs to of the Djibouti Code of Conduct and give his perspectives on strengthening the AIM strategy using the Indo-Pacific cooperation mechanisms. Ms. Muapue Saiwai, she's just joined us from abroad. She landed up today at 3 o'clock and she's here. That's remarkable on your part to be here, and of course how important the topic is for all of us over here. So thank you so much for that. And she will be speaking on how, on India's engagement with Africa, and I again go back to the 10 founding principles that the Prime Minister enunciated in Uganda in 2018. And finally, we will listen to Admiral Surya Viranto, from Indo-Pacific Strategic Intelligence, Jakarta. The Admiral will speak on how Indonesia, the world's largest archipelagic nation, could strengthen Africa in the maritime domain. That brings me to the end of my brief, and I now hand over to Mark to take on the proceedings. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. And if I can stand on the protocol as observed, thanks to the National Maritime Foundation for inviting me to do this presentation. So I'm going to look at South Africa's perspective on the AIMS 2050 and how we work from there. And in my scope, you will see that I will focus on Africa, move towards Southern Africa, and then look at South Africa's involvement and how we see AIMS 2050 and how we also involved in making that work. So some of the information has already been stated by the moderator, but suffice to say that there are 54 member states in the African Union. We spoke about the coastline, and maybe just at the bottom there to say that the second largest continent with vast urbanization, specifically along the coastal belts, where the population is, of course, working on the coastal areas. So if we then look at the regional economic communities for Africa, you will see that there are 8 economic communities and regional mechanisms, and there's also slight or sometimes even more of the overlapping in that. So we need to understand that with the significant overlap, there will be some of the countries which will have dual purposes. So we will focus mostly on the eastern side, and we will look at those countries that are involved in the Indo-Pacific, and then also more specifically at the SADC involvement in that. So when I started to look at this, I looked at the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, and they've got a governance index which looks at how governance and security governance specifically is on the African continent. And one needs to then look at the fact that this is focused more on landward security, so take that into account. And of course, when one looks at the statistics that were indicated as such over there, Madagascar turmoil, of course, at this stage, because this is 2023, not factored in. There's a deteriorating governance on the continent which remains problematic. Of course, one also needs to understand that when we look at, for instance, one of the criteria, which is increased improvement, that does not mean good governance. It just means in that period of under review, there was increased good government. And then historically, South Africa is seen as an anchor state for Africa. Even there, we see slow deterioration. But if one then delves a bit deeper into that, you have the indicators as such, and those are more specifically the security indicators. And we look at 5 specific ones, which are security, rule of law, safety, justice, accountability, transparency, and anti-corruption. And one then should take into consideration that you can see that the countries in specifically around the Horn of Africa and the Gulf of Aden, there's a problem in terms of their security indicators. So that is where our prime problem areas lie. So then if we then understand that there's a problem in terms of the security issues around that, how do we work from there towards the African Union? So in the African Union, there are, of course, many, as was discussed, such strategies in place, but selected ones of them, I'll quickly look at some of them as well. So in terms of the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, it was adopted in 2015. It identifies the blue economy as a key priority and involves the harnessing of the aquatic endowments of Africa. Another key one is the Lomé Charter, which is the Africa Charter on Maritime Security and Safety and Development in Africa, adopted in 2016, which is a legally binding treaty that guides African states in combating maritime crime like piracy, and which was discussed earlier. The Charter moves then Africa maritime security efforts from non-binding guidelines to a legally binding framework, and which then reinforces the AIMS 2050 strategy. The key aspects of those include maritime security, the blue economy development, and of course it covers a wide range of maritime crimes. The next one is the Africa Blue Economy Strategy, launched in 2019, further outlines the Africa Blue Resources, how it can be developed and sustained. The fourth one is the Africa Oceans Governance Strategy and Implementation Plan, which is a framework for enhancing ocean governance and coordination across Africa. The key goals include creating of a regional vision for marine spatial planning and ensuring the operationalization of the integrated governance and national regional levels. So the key focus areas there: governance, marine spatial planning, blue economy, climate change, and capacity building, which links onto where we are standing today. Then, of course, AIMS 2050, which I'll touch on a little bit later, which was discussed previously as well. So before one then goes into what are we doing in terms of what is happening in Africa, one needs to look at what are the risks and those responsibilities. So the regional vulnerability to spillover risks, we're looking at migrating threats in the Red Sea, the Horn of Africa, volatility on land, DR Congo, and specifically Mozambique, where we had the insurrection and what happened in the Cabo Delgado province. And then, of course, political turmoil in Mozambique and Madagascar, which we saw recently. There's a low maritime capacity in SADC littoral states, and one can see that when you look at the capacity and capability of the specific navies and coast guards in the region and how they are underfunded and under-resourced. Which we'll touch on a bit later, an absence of a national maritime security strategy in most littoral states, although on the regional level it looks better. And then there's resilience to crime syndicates, rising interest, which we discussed yesterday, in seabed minerals, hydrocarbons, etc. The Cape Sea route, which becomes quite important when one looks at what happened in the Red Sea area recently in accordance with that. And then, of course, what we have, and we've seen also in many presentations, increased external naval and commercial activity in the Pacific Indian Ocean. So AIMS 2050, when you have a look at the Africa Peace and Security Architecture, there are the AU Commission, the Panel of the Wise, the Continental Early Warning System, African Standby Force, and the Peace Fund. And when you delve deeper into that, you'll find that that was basically designed for landward security. So when Africa normally looks at security, it is normally an inward focus in terms of the land area. So to try and attempt to fill this void, we created the African Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050. So in 2009, the AU Commission was tasked to create a strategy with the regional economic communities and mechanisms involved. And it's a broad framework to exploit the maritime domain for the protection of and wealth creation for that. The objectives, I think some of the objectives were already covered by the moderator. I'm not going to delve into that. But then in terms of the strategic actions that this AIMS 2050 needs to address, is the combined EEZ for Africa. And we saw that on the slide by the previous speaker, that is really not in place yet, but although it's a work in progress. Interagency transnational cooperation and coordination on maritime safety and security, which is basically what this conference is also about, and creation of the regional maritime operational centers in all RECs and mechanisms. So the task force, the AIMS 2050 task force was established, and the Department of Maritime Affairs was created. But the problem, as we saw in the previous speaker's slides as well, is that although we have that office, we don't really have people staffed in there. We don't have an HR strategy to staff those specific instances. So as we stand at the moment, important institutions are not yet created. It's not politically or institutionally integrated into the security architecture. And one must then look at this from the perspective of Africa looking at landward security as the most important part of their security. But there is a plan of action, and there is operationalization of this specific plan. And from my perspective, when I look at the AIMS 2050, the initial start of this plan, was it supposed to be a top-down or bottom-up approach? And from my perspective, when we look at look at the strategies for the regional economic communities and also the specific countries, then somewhere there's a disconnect in terms of where we got to where we are standing today. It does have its shortcomings, but it does highlight the maritime security agenda and contributes specifically to the reduction of sea blindness. So what about SADC then? If that's Africa, where do we stand on SADC? We've got the SADC organ on politics, defense, and security, and then, of course, the ministerial committee thereof. One level down from that, we've got the SADC Standing Maritime Committee. And for me, that is one of the good stories to tell from the SADC in terms of the maritime domain. And once we go further through this presentation, you'll see that at many places I touch on the Standing Maritime Committee, where they are involved in many of the issues. So there's also the Integrated Maritime Security Strategy, I'll get to a little bit later. Fisheries monitoring, which was discussed, Southwest Indian Ocean Fisheries Commission, and also the SADC Secretariat, which are all involved somehow in the maritime sphere. So if one then takes this a little bit down further and say, okay, so what is SADC doing in terms of trying to link up with AIMS 2050 to get there? So there's the Integrated Maritime Security Strategy and also the South African strategy, which I'll touch on here as well. So in terms of the SADC strategy, the initial strategy was designed in 2010, roundabout, when we had the height of piracy in Somalia. We had some piracy incidents in the channels, and the Standing Maritime Committee was tasked to draw up the strategy. The initial strategy then, which was approved, was very narrowly focused on piracy. Go a few years further, and this strategy needed to be adopted because it wasn't just piracy. Piracy was going down, but we had other maritime crimes and terrorism, etc., increasing, and this needed to be updated. So it was updated, and it became the Integrated Maritime Security Strategy, and of course, it covered a host of other maritime crimes in the area, and also contributed to the domain awareness and piracy, drugs, and human trafficking, etc. So, in terms of the South African strategy, maybe I can also mention here before we get to the end, is that the strategy is a work in progress. We do not have an integrated maritime security strategy in South Africa yet. And as the previous speakers mentioned, there's a host of departments involved. In South Africa, there's about 25 government departments involved, and then you have to get the outside influences involved in this process as well. And for me, a strategy development process is the process to get there, and that is the main part of that. The document for me is the secondary part. And sometimes I feel that people work on checkboxes. We need a strategy, but then it becomes something you put in a drawer and you don't use. So this process is ongoing. The university that I represent was asked to be involved in this process, and so it's something in being, and maybe in the next year or two, we'll see something happening on this front. Then SADC is also involved in Operation Copper. I'll get to that now. Speak a bit more, because that's our flagship project in terms of where we work from here, the operation in terms of working together in SADC region. Operation Vikela is the SADC, the South African part of the South African Development Community's mission in Mozambique. If you remember on the news, there was insurgency in the northern provinces of Mozambique, and SADC, we had a mission in the area. SADC was involved, Rwanda and other countries, and SADC has since withdrawn from that mission, and the Navy's part of that, providing an OPV and also a frigate to patrol the areas and cut off the supply routes, was Operation Vikela. And then maybe hydrography is also one of those good stories to tell, is the South African Hydrographic Office is recognized as a center of hydrographic excellence in Africa by the IHO. And they're doing really sterling work. They've got a really big area to cover from Mozambique all the way to Angola. And they've been a member of the IHO since 1951. They drew up the hydrographic cooperation plan for the Standing Maritime Committee, as we spoke about earlier. They encouraged the members of SADC to apply to the International Hydrographic Organization. And then from that, the Southern African and Islands Hydrographic Commission was established in 1996 to improve hydrography in the region. Djibouti Code of Conduct and the Jeddah Amendment, it's going to be the next speaker. I'm not going to touch on that. And also, IHORA was discussed. South Africa was chairman, and we focused on maritime safety, disaster risk management, etc. Maybe just a quick few words on Operation Copper. It was mainly anti-piracy, and as I said, it stemmed from the Maritime Security Strategy. There was a tripartite MOU between South Africa, Mozambique, and Tanzania. Tanzania withdrew due to various reasons, but it's got specific military strategic objectives, and we can go into that specifically on the questions if you want. And it commenced in 2011 during the height of piracy. And at this stage, what happens is South Africa used its platforms, frigates, patrol boats, etc., and used Mozambican personnel on board when operating in the Mozambican waters. Initially for a period of 1 year, and was lately extended to 2026. Those are the areas of operations. Initially, the northern part there you'll see in Pemba, and that's where and Nakala. We had a forward operating base in Pemba and operated from there, and then the secondary area to the south. And since then, the forward operating base has been disbanded, and we then operate from South Africa. So for bilateral cooperation on the SADC front, we've got Operation Copper, which we spoke about. And then, of course, South Africa also has some operations with other navies in the area. In this case, we can look at Interop East and West, which is scheduled by the Standing Maritime Committee. And SADC member states are invited then to provide personnel where South Africa provides the platforms to do those patrols and exercises up in the east and the west coast. We've got Atlas Sur, which is South Africa and South American navies, working also a yearly exercise, focusing on combined operations and working together. Good Hope, which is South Africa and Germany, yearly exercise, mostly in South African waters. Ipsamar, which is between India, Brazil, and South Africa, maybe looking towards BRICS. And then MOSI is probably one that is very controversial in terms of South Africans' involvement in exercises with specifically Russia and China, and timing might be the issues here, and people are also starting to talk about BRICS and maybe South-South cooperation. And then lastly, Shared Accord, which with South Africa and the USA, 2020 to 2023, looking at HADR types operations. So South Africa is already involved in many other operations and providing its forces and providing its platforms in order to be able to cooperate and capacitate. So as a summary, one can look at the fact that the AU, as we discussed in the slides, provides a vast productive maritime landscape, as we discussed. It has maritime threats that stems from weak governance on land and sea. So one needs to understand that insecurity at sea does not just happen on its own. It stems from insecurity at land. And at some stage, you have to attempt to solve the insecurity at land before you'll get to the sea area. There are ex-regional and extra-regional threats and vulnerabilities at play. Multiple SADC entities are designated to attend to these risks. national expressions and institutionalization of maritime concerns are too often very low-keyed, and regional and international naval cooperation is but one expression of the maritime security and how we affect AIMS 2050. One also needs to understand that AIMS 2050 is a Pan-African strategy. National strategies are a work in progress and may, of course, reflect a higher level of ambition. Operation Copper, as I discussed, provides a proven operation, capability of cooperation endeavor, and could well be utilized to further this specific agenda. We require external partners to also understand the political context of the African states and tap into their local expertise. Capacity building and enhancement remain a key for success. Thank you very much.
So just for the audience, Mr. Kiruja Misheni is waiting online, and we will listen to his brief, and thereafter we will break for tea. So Mr. Kiruja Misheni will come online now.
Thank you very much, and I hope you can hear me. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Mr. Machine.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to ride on the protocols already established. It is indeed a privilege to join you for the 2025 edition of the Indo-Pacific Regional Dialogue, and I have the honor to contribute to this session on strengthening the Africa Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050 with a presentation on a DCOC JEDA amendment perspective of Indo-Pacific regional cooperation to strengthen AIMS 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa's Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050 provides a bold and comprehensive framework for securing Africa's seas, advancing prosperity, safety, and sustainable development for the continent and its partners. In line with this vision, the Djibouti Code of Conduct, as underscored in its preamble, explicitly recognize AIMS 2050 as a guiding continental strategy and commit to contributing to its realization through enhanced regional and international cooperation. In the Western Indian Ocean, Gulf of Aden, and the Red Sea, the DCOC-JA has become the region's legitimate and trusted mechanism to move from policy to practice, addressing piracy, transnational maritime crime, and emerging security threats. The key question before us today is therefore not where cooperation is needed, but how practical, focused, and state-led Indo-Pacific partnerships can accelerate the delivery of AIMS 2050 through the DCOC-JA framework. I firmly believe that the DCOC states are uniquely positioned to lead on governance, operational cooperation, and legal finish, not in theory, but through tangible results, some of which we are already seeing. Over the past decade, the DCOC has evolved from a counter-piracy instruments into a credible regional maritime security framework. It has established a functional information sharing network, created structured working groups, including Working Group 3, focused on operational cooperation and coordination at sea, and developed legal and operational mechanisms that are already delivering impact at sea. Indo-Pacific and international partners can amplify these achievements by aligning capacities, leveraging existing deconfliction platforms, and supporting sustainable financing. In parallel, industry and civil society can play a pivotal role in strengthening early warning systems, crisis response mechanisms, and resilience. If these efforts are strategically synchronized, the region can significantly accelerate the implementation of AIMS 2050 over the next 2 to 3 years. AIMS 2050 sets Africa's strategic vision for maritime security and blue growth. DCOC provides the operational engine to deliver it. Today's conversation is therefore about aligning Indo-Pacific cooperation to make that engine run faster, stronger, and more sustainably. So, why this and why now? As you know, the maritime security situation in the Gulf of Aden, Red Sea, and the Western Indian Ocean has deteriorated sharply. And you recall that since November last year, 2023, we've had many attacks on commercial vessels, largely by Houthi forces, which have disrupted global trade, increased shipping costs, and endangered lives. The August 2024 strike on MT's Union starkly demonstrated how a single attack could trigger catastrophic environmental devastation, threatening fragile maritime ecosystems, endangering coastal communities, and severely disrupting global trade and energy supply chains. At the same time, Somali piracy had started to resurface, reminding us that security gains can quickly be reversed if not sustained. So, we'd like to look at three dynamics which make this urgent. First, as just highlighted, the maritime security threat landscape has become increasingly complex. Piracy, conflict-related attacks, trafficking, IU fishing, and cyber vulnerabilities are no longer isolated challenges. They are converging, compounding risks, and testing existing security architectures. Second, a robust architecture already exists. The DCOC-JEA, complete with this information sharing network, linked with regional centers, including the IFC Iowa, the Regional Maritime Information Fusion Center in Madagascar, and the Regional Coordination Operations Center in Seychelles. Third, the existence of external operational mechanisms such as EU NAVFOR Atalanta and the Combined Maritime Force, together with India's expanding Indo-Pacific maritime security partnerships, provide critical platforms for operational support. In parallel, SHADE continues to serve as a key coordination mechanism, facilitating deconfliction and enhanced collaboration among naval forces. These capabilities now can be fully synchronized and leveraged through the newly established DCOC Working Group 3 on operational cooperation and coordination at sea. Fourth, existing platforms such as IORIS, India's NISHA, Sea Vision, and Mercury provide powerful tools for real-time coordination, shared situation awareness, and enhanced maritime domain awareness across national, regional, and international partners. Let's look at the strategic bridge between the AIMS 2050 and the DCOC-JA. Now, AIMS 2050 calls for secure sea lanes, protection of marine resources, and strengthened maritime governance, while DCOC provides the regional cooperation mechanism to deliver these outcomes against piracy, maritime terrorism, IU fishing, and other illicit activities. The DCOC has already advanced this agenda by establishing working groups, enhancing information sharing, coordinating capacity building, and enabling joint operations. The bridge between vision and the delivery lies in operational cooperation and legal finish, donor alignment, and industry integration, synchronized through the DCOC-JEA. Now let's look at the DCOC cooperation model with Indo-Pacific. Now, we'll introduce here an idea for three pillars. And pillar one is operational cooperation at sea. This anchored on the DCOC Working Group 3 concept of operation. Now, this focuses on joint operations, SOPs for information routing, patrol coordination, evidence handling, and synchronized naval deployments. seeks to integrate existing external support, e.g. EU NAFO Atalanta, EU Aspides, CMF India, with DCOC states leadership and coordination role, ensuring that partnership strengthens, not substitute national and regional ownership, and includes use of deconfliction platforms such as SHADE, which is shared awareness and deconfliction. Now, what are the ideas then for Indo-Pacific entry points? Here I propose the idea of liaison officer exchanges and ship rider agreements, joint patrol and escort tasking coordination, and real-time queuing through shared platforms. Now, Pillar 2, maritime domain awareness and information sharing, which covers operationalization of national and regional information hubs, integration of secure MDA platforms, e.g. IORIS, NISHA, MACRE, Vision, to establish maritime coordination cells and enhance early warning, situation awareness, and information sharing among DCOC, signatory states, and partners. Encourages voluntary industry reporting and engagement of port authorities for faster queuing and improved situation awareness. Now here, the ideas for Indo-Pacific entry point will be technology transfer and training of on MDA tools, joint data sharing protocols and incident reporting standards, interconnection of Indo-Pacific and Western Indian Ocean reporting networks. And then Pillar 3, the legal finish, resilience and industry partnership. And here we're looking at supporting the rule of law and sustainable blue economy, aligned with AIMS 2050. The need for launch or strengthen a regional legal forum to standardize model laws, maritime law enforcement frameworks, and evidence chain of custody SOPs in coordination with UNODC. Then institutionalization of public-private maritime security forum with shipping, offshore operators, and insurers. And then integration of cyber resilience, baselines, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief exercises, and protection of critical infrastructure. And then promotion of transfer agreements, ship rider opportunities, and legal fellowships to strengthen prosecution outcomes. Now, here, where do we get the Indo-Pacific entry? We look at ideas for legal fellowships again, and support with capacity building, co-fund exercises and cyber tabletop drills, industry partnerships for resilience and reporting integration. Why is this important? This model provides a coherent interface between African coastal states, Indo-Pacific partners, and industry, transforming fragmented support into a structured, state-led, and sustainable cooperation framework. It aligns operational capability with AIMS 2050 objectives, enabling faster response, better deterrence, and stronger legal accountability. Now, what's changed? What current developments must we integrate? First, the strong and growing naval presence of international partners in the region, including EU Aspides, alongside EU NAFO Atalanta, Combined Maritime Forces, India, and other deploying nations, reflects the goodwill and commitment of international community to support regional maritime security efforts. However, historically, many of these deployments have been planned and executed with only minimum coordination with regional states, limiting strategic alignment and shared ownership. The newly established DCOC Working Group 3 provides an opportunity to change this dynamic by serving as the regional interface for these operations, ensuring sovereignty, enabling structured burden sharing, and maximizing both deterrence and information flow through closer coordination and joint operations planning. Second, The indicators of piracy resurgence demand sustained vigilance. The DCOC sub-working group on port and ship security and protection of coastal installations should be operationalized through Working Group 3 to provide a proactive DCOC coordinated approach for effectively addressing emerging piracy threats and safeguarding critical maritime infrastructure. Here, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not suggesting an idea of the DCOC doing it all, but the DCOC being a framework of collaboration, providing the framework that enables all the partners to work together. And then the other one, I would like to look at the information sharing maturation. The development of the regional information sharing network alongside the regional vessels of interest database, which is soon to be developed, will promote standardized routing, classification, and after-action reporting process. These processes are essential to ensure interoperability and timely information exchange across states and regional centers. Now, what are the concrete actions that we'd like to see in the next year or two? First of all, for the DCOC states, we recommend the prioritization on implementation of the IMO model on the whole of government approach to maritime security. And this entails the establishment and operationalization of national maritime security committees to strengthen interagency coordination, the development of national maritime security risk registers to enable informed decision-making and prioritization, and the formation of national maritime security strategies to provide a clear strategic framework. Together, these elements operationalize the pillars of governance, legal and institutional framework, maritime domain awareness, and coordinated operational response. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to highlight that this program was developed after a lot of lessons learned, where it was established that coordination at national level remained weak, and that you really cannot have effective regional cooperation without effective coordination at national level. And that is why Article 3 of the JEDA amendment, which covers all these areas, the measures to be implemented at national level, was included when it was being drafted. Second, to institutionalize through legislation the National Maritime Information Sharing Centers as well as the National Maritime Security Committees. And then third, connect the NMSCs to RMIFC and RCOC, as well as IFC Iowa, and then maintain a 24/7 watchkeeping and ensure incident backposting within 24 hours, as well as nominating Working Group 3 planners. And then commit assets to at least two Working Group 3 multinational exercises per year. So ship riders, patrol days, search and rescue drills, etc., etc. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to highlight that some of these suggestions I'm making are what are contained in the roadmap for the Working Group 3. I would be very happy to share both the report of the Working Group 3 as well as the roadmap and the concept of operation, because I think it is in the interest of everyone interested in the operations in the region to be familiar with the recommendations that I've made. And then pass and update maritime crime registration for piracy, IUU, wildlife, narcotics, trafficking, and designate national prosecution focal points to the regional RIGO forum. Then adopt minimum saber baselines for ports, MDA, conduct exercises annually, and then also to mainstream inclusion. At least 30% of women youth participation in the National Maritime Security Committees and National Maritime Information Sharing, National Maritime Information Sharing Center staffing and all working group trainings. And then for Indo-Pacific and international partners, here the recommendation is to align support through the DCOC assistance matrix, avoid standalone platforms, pledge multi-year financing into the DCOC Trust Fund, and then consider seconding experts, that's mainly MDA, cyber, legal, to the centers, as well as supporting the work of the Working Group 3, and as well as support Working Group 3 coordinated exercises and evidence handling. And then share MDA tools, as well as supporting efforts for ensuring a legal finish. Now, how would we measure the impact? What kind of practical KPIs can we consider here? First of all, considering the importance of information sharing, we'd aim to have at least 8 NMICs at full operational capability by the end of 2027. Currently, we can say there are 2 that we can say have achieved full operational capability. And then have at least 2 working group exercises by 2027, and in this case, hoping that it would even include exercise industry observers. Other ideas would be to align donor assistance through the matrix, and then industry participation and voluntary reporting, having at least 50% of major carriers by 2027, and then cyber SOPs integrated, from 0 to about 10 by 2027. Now, these indicators are achievable if we get projects through the assistance matrix, keep the confliction at shade, and sustain political leadership through the DCOC steering committee. I would now like to look at governance and risk mitigation. So first of all, on sovereignty and ownership, the DCOC working group serves as the African anchor for the operational coordination with navies and industry. On the confliction and transparency, use SHADE for calendars and after action reports, publish an annual who does what donor map. For legal finish safeguards, regional legal forums standardizes evidence and maritime law enforcement with a commitment to reduce catch and release. Then cyber tech guardrails, there's open standards, minimum controls, and then for sustainability, the use of the DCOC's trust fund and national cost sharing, train the trainer pipelines and internalize skills. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to say that AIMS 2050 reminds us that upward of 90% of Africa's trade moves by sea. Securing maritime corridor is a development imperative, not just a security task. If DCOC states lead on governance, operations, and legal finish, and if Indo-Pacific partners align through DCOC mechanism, then within 2 years, we can show tangible results, more capable NMICs, regularized joint operations, successful prosecutions, resilient ports and MDA networks, and a trusted, structured partnership with industry. This is how DCOC-JA perspective makes AIMS 2050 real. From strategy to sea, from commitment to cases, from patrol days to livelihoods protected. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now break for tea, just as yesterday. The tea is being served at separate venues. I trust the ushering team will guide you in case you need to know where the venues are exactly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope everybody's refreshed. Everyone's had a good cup of tea or coffee. With that, we have our panelists have already joined us on stage. So I'll hand over the proceedings to Admiral Rajkumar. Sir, you have the floor. Sir.
Without further ado, I think we'll just launch into the third presentation that will be given by the Joint Secretary at the MEA, Ms. Moapwai Savai. Please come.
Thank you so much. I congratulate Chairman NMF, Admiral K.V. Singh, and Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, and the team in National Maritime Foundation in hosting this IPRD 2025, which we've been looking forward to, and thank you for inviting me. The interaction between NMF and the DISA division of the Ministry of External Affairs has been very encouraging and insightful for both sides. I can only express sincere gratitude to NMF for their regular, timely, relevant, and valuable policy recommendations that greatly enhance our perspectives. I will start my speech with two quotes from Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Earlier this year, he said, "We have taken the Sagar vision forward for the stability and prosperity of this entire region. Taking it forward today, I would like to say that our vision for the Global South will be beyond Sagar, Mahasagar, that is mutual and holistic advancement for security and growth across regions." End of quote. This vision is intrinsically founded on India's philosophy of Vasudeva Kutumbakam. The whole world is one family. Last year, Prime Minister also said, "If this is to be a century of nations rising together in freedom and equality, if this is to be an age when the light of opportunities dawn on all humans, if this is a time when our planet has a more hopeful future, then all of this magnificent continent of Africa must walk in step with the rest of the world. India will work with you and for you." End of quote. India's engagement with Africa has been guided by the 10 principles enunciated by our Prime Minister, which reaffirm that Africa's goals and agenda are India's priority. India believes in an inclusive, demand-driven development cooperation by way of building local capacity and creating local opportunities, ensuring that African countries not only benefit from investments, but also develop self-sustaining growth ecosystems. India is committed to the overall development of Africa by keeping our markets open, sharing our experiences with the digital revolution to support Africa's development, improving delivery of public services, spreading education and digital literacy in Africa, strengthening African agriculture, and working with African nations, and I highlight now, to keep the oceans open and free for the benefit of all nations. Demonstrating our commitment to Africa, we have expanded our diplomatic footprint in recent years with opening of 17 new diplomatic missions, bringing the total number of Indian missions in the continent to 46. And we are proud of our long-standing educational ties with Africa. You will recall that India, in its G20 presidency in 2023, pushed for Africa Union's full membership of the G20. Now, the best partnerships in the world are built due to common threats and common interests. It is only after such convergences that we can find specific deliverables to enhance maritime security cooperation in the region. let me tell you why India and Africa can work efficiently together. 1. India's maritime security strategy is broad and multifaceted, addressing both traditional and non-traditional threats, which are reflected in the Information Fusion Center Indian Ocean Region, IFC-IOR's, reports under the categories of piracy and armed robbery, contraband smuggling, IUU fishing, irregular human migration, maritime incidents, hybrid threats, marine environment pollution, cybersecurity threats, climate change, and security. We find it encouraging that there are complementarities under these headings with the threats and vulnerabilities highlighted by the Africa Integrated Maritime Strategy, AIMS 2050. We couldn't agree more that the AIMS 2050, which aligns with India's recognition of the need for enhanced maritime governance both nationally and regionally. And we are extremely encouraged to note that AIMS 2050 refers to IC5, that is information sharing, communication, collaboration, cooperation, capacity building, and coordination, which are almost in near perfect alignment with India's 5 pillars of collaboration in the maritime domain, namely information sharing, capability enhancement, capacity building, operational coordination, and public messaging. Now, let me briefly highlight, and you may have heard some of this before, but I just wanted to highlight what the Indian Navy has been able to achieve. Over the last 2 years, in response to shipping attacks and rising incidents of piracy in the Western Arabian Sea, the Indian Navy has deployed over 35 ships in the region, carried out more than 1,000 boarding operations, and has responded to over 30 incidents. The credible and swift action of Indian Navy saved more than 520 lives, irrespective of the nationality and crew. Indian Navy has safely escorted over 367 merchant vessels carrying over 14.7 metric tons of cargo valued at over 6.3 billion US dollars. Indian Navy, including IFC-IOR, has been at the forefront of operations to monitor, share information, and counter piracy incidents. India's involvement in the cases of MV Ruin, MV Laila Norfolk, MV Abdullah, and rescue from Somalian pirates of fishing vessels Al Naimi, Iman, and Omari, and Al Kambar 786, independently by India, as well as fishing trawler Lorenzo Putha, in coordination with Seychelles and Sri Lanka, are well known among many others. In addition, India has executed and continues to carry out numerous boarding ops against suspicious vessels in the area to thwart piracy attempts. India is following up on anti-piracy operations with appropriate legal finish by trying the pirates in India under the landmark Maritime Anti-Piracy Act 2022. However, the problem is so huge that we admit that we cannot do it alone and we need partners. Thus, we work bilaterally, we work quadrilaterally, plurilaterally, and multilaterally. We are an active member of Contact Group on Illicit Maritime Activities, CGIMA. We are chair of the Expert Working Group on Maritime Security in BIMSTEC, observer in DCOC-JA, Indian Ocean Commission, and Western Pacific Naval Symposium. We are also a friend in the G7++ Friends of Gulf of Guinea construct. Our joining the combined maritime forces based in Bahrain as a member offers opportunities for greater cooperation in the region. We look forward to leading the combined task forces in CMF soon. We actively engage in ASEAN-centric fora and initiatives such as the Indian Ocean Rim Association and the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, apart from the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. I will highlight how India is working with and intends to support Africa under the 5 pillars, including through the maritime constructs which pertain to Africa, such as DCOCJA, CGIMA, G7++ FOG, with the Yaoundé architecture. Pillar 1, information sharing. We aim to enhance information sharing among partner states with an eye toward developing a common operational picture across the region. Our IFC IOR at Gurugram has provided a useful platform for developing maritime domain awareness. We are happy that we already have 15 international liaison officers in IFC IOR. We continue to enhance the infrastructure of the IFC IOR to facilitate more partnerships, increased scope of information network, greater ability for analysis, and provision for quicker, real-time, actionable information. We are in the process of upgrading further to house more ILOs to enable a broader collaborative architecture. We are happy to extend the support of IFC IOR to all in the region and beyond. We are extremely fortunate to have heard from Mr. Kiruja Micheni, Project Manager DCOC, earlier today. And last month, the first ever rotational DCOC International Liaison Officer from Kenya, his name is Major Brian, representing all DCOC JA member states, has been inducted into IFC IOR. This indicates a significant partnership between India and Africa as a whole, as the first ILO from the continent of Africa gets inducted into IFC. IFC IOR has an MOU with Regional Coordination Operations Center, RCOC, Seychelles, and is already coordinating with Regional Maritime Information Fusion Center, RMIFC, Madagascar. IFC IOR has been added as a key reporting center in DCOC JA, and we are happy that IFC IOR is now included as a reporting center in the IMO Best Practices Maritime Security. India contributed wholeheartedly to facilitate the ISN workshop at Jeddah in 2023 and has been actively involved in designing and shaping the SOPs for DCOC information sharing network that would be a cornerstone for enhancing maritime security. Our partnership in a Quad initiative named the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness will enable better MDA into the Indo-Pacific, including dark vessel detection. India is the leader of the IPMDA program in the Indian Ocean region, which will roll out in the near future. India has strongly supported regional partners in real-time and critical information sharing, and further, as we move forward, we will fund for and provide for the information to selected partner states, including those in Africa. We hope that with increased information exchange in the future, a common operational picture emerges and feeds into an enhanced MDA picture for the region. This would assist us to gain a more comprehensive perspective and help us to effectively deal with the common challenges to maritime security in the Indo-Pacific. Pillar number 2, we are synchronizing efforts for capability development and enhancement of partner states to respond to contemporary maritime security challenges. Next week, IFC IOR will be conducting the 3rd Maritime Information Sharing Workshop. The first edition was held for IORA countries, then for DCOC plus IORA countries, and now it will also include BIMSTEC and therefore culminate in Mahasagar. India will also be setting up national maritime information sharing centers in some DCOC-JA states. We have also offered our assistance in formulation of national and regional maritime security risk register, as well as national and regional maritime security strategy for DCOC-JA. G7++ FOG is an important maritime security construct in the Western Africa region. India has been an active participant in the G7++ FOG meetings. We have sent naval assets regularly for long deployments and intend to continue such efforts for the security of the African region. We held the first ever India-EU maritime exercise in the Gulf of Guinea in 2023 to increase our collaborative efforts. India has also been at the forefront in offering training to African candidates under its flagship Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, ITEC, including Navy-to-Navy courses. Having focused adequately on capability development and enhancement, India has been supporting DCOC-JA in redesign of the capacity building matrix of all the member states and suggested that it be renamed Assistance Matrix, since capacity building is only one pillar of holistic maritime collaboration. We are now partnering with the IMO and DCOC-JA to bring this initiative to fruition. And that was Pillar 3, capacity building. Now, CGIMA is re-envisioned from a former initiative known as the Contact Group on Piracy off the coast of Somalia, CGPCS. India proposed to remodel the categories of maritime crime with the currently reported illicit maritime activities by the IFC-IOR. India also proposed to make IFC-IOR as CGIMA's partner of choice in becoming the hub of information sharing network to harmonize efforts. India will continue to build its engagements with CGIMA and chart out its own role in supporting policy decisions to combat IMA in the region. Most importantly, in close partnership with the chair, Seychelles, India is happy to contribute to creation of an umbrella of strategic guidance that would be afforded to maritime constructs in the area by CGIMA. Then there is Indian Ocean Commission. As I mentioned earlier, we are already engaging with the IOC Maritime Security Architecture through our collaboration with RMIFC and RCOC. Now, all the previous pillars, information sharing, capability development and enhancement, and capacity building, they lead to the executive pillar, pillar number 4, operation coordination. In September, we participated as a comprehensive delegation in the inaugural event of the setup of DCOC-JA Working Group 3 on operational coordination in Mombasa, Kenya. The forthcoming high-level meeting at Mauritius will focus on the specific objectives and way ahead of this working group, and we would be contributing activities to this endeavor. Let me speak about a very important exercise that we undertook. In April, India undertook a large-scale multilateral maritime engagement exercise with 10 African countries titled as Africa India Key Maritime Engagement, IKYM, which means unity in Sanskrit. This initiative aims to develop collaborative solutions to regional maritime challenges, enhance interoperability, and strengthen the friendly relations between India and African nations. The maiden edition of the exercise was co-hosted by the Indian Navy and Tanzania People's Defense Force and conducted off Dar es Salaam. The exercise over 6 days included participations from Comoros, Djibouti, Kenya, Madagascar, Mauritius, Mozambique, Seychelles, and South Africa, in addition to the co-hosts. 9 ships participated in the exercise apart from the delegations from each of the 8 countries. The harbor phase with joint training and exercise focused on piracy and information sharing and was followed by a sea phase to enhance maritime security cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is not an indication of India's sincerity of purpose to our close collaboration with Africa, then what is? Next, India is a committed member of the Combined Maritime Forces, a multilateral construct headquartered in Bahrain. We are working towards commanding the combined task forces. Indian Navy ship working in direct support of New Zealand-led CTF-150 seized a substantial amount of illicit narcotics from a vessel in the Arabian Sea this March, in one of the largest narcotics seizures in the region recently. Utilizing information from the CTF-150 command team and Indian Navy P-8I aircraft patrolling overhead, the Indian crew intercepted the suspicious vessel, sending over a boarding team to carry out a thorough search, and the illicit cargo was subsequently seized. We are also happy that in the last edition of Milan, a multinational biennial exercise conducted by Navy on the eastern coast of India, witnessed the participation of as many 14 African countries out of 51 nations. Pillar 5 is collaborative public messaging initiatives are being taken to dissuade and deter detractors that engage in illicit maritime activities. Dissuasion is the first line of defense against IMA, and that is best achieved by effective public messaging in a collaborative manner to indicate the resolve of regional partners. Also, the more effective we are in achieving the 4 pillars unilaterally and collectively through our partners, that in itself would be the deterrence. At the end, I would like to apprise this August gathering of one of the most unique MARSEC initiatives in the world. Indian Ocean Ship Sagar is an initiative towards continued cooperation with IOR nations. Indian naval ship was deployed in April and May with a combined crew of India and 44 international crew of 9 friendly foreign countries. The crew were not sea riders nor observers. They were fellow actors, brothers and sisters in arms, part of the crew and very much the core essence of this unique endeavor, truly signifying the motto of one ocean, one mission. This mission is a testament to India's commitment to be the first responder and global security partner in IOR towards India's strategic vision of Mahasagar, mutual and holistic advancement for security across regions. Ladies and gentlemen, the diversity of maritime challenges affects nations differently. Priority areas may differ among partners, but are interlinked in some manner or the other, and we hope that the vision of IPRD would address the concerns of all partners, including those contained in Africa Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to the Joint Secretary, Ms. Sayavi, for a wonderful brief on starting from Mahasagar to all the pillars that the Indian government is working upon to increase the engagement in Africa. I would now request Admiral Surya Virantu to take us through his presentation on how Indonesia can bring to bear certain initiatives, proposals, and recommendations for engagement with Africa in the maritime domain. Over to you, sir.
This one, next year, or next day one. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, Salam, Om Swastiastu, Nama Budaya, greeting of future. Excellencies, speakers, and moderator, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to speak before this maritime and defense community at IPRD Forum, New Delhi 2025. And this afternoon, I will share my topic, Safeguarding the Seas through Regional Cooperation, Indonesia Role in Advancing Africa's Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050. This presentation will focus on examining the strategic imperative of cooperation between Indonesia and Africa within the framework of the Africa Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050 and Indonesia Maritime Outlook. And this big idea follows up on our president, my president Prabowo Subianto's idea in the Good Neighborhood Policy, which has been conveyed in various international forums. The sea has always been both the frontier and the foundation of civilization. For Indonesians and those across Africa, the maritime domain awareness defines not only our geography, but also our identity, our connectivity, and our security. Throughout this story, the ocean has shaped who we are as traders, navigators, and guardians of maritime routes. And today, as the world faces renewed geopolitical tension and environmental stress, the oceans once again stands at the center of our common destiny. And this afternoon, I will share a vision of a shared maritime future grounded in cooperation across the Indian Ocean, a partnership built on trust, equality, and mutual respect. This is my presented focus. There are 6 points I will explain about. I come to the first point, shared maritime destiny. Indonesia, with its 17,000 islands, and Africa, with more than 30,000 kilometers of coastline, represent two vast maritime spheres connected by the Indian Ocean, a corridor of trade, culture, and ideas. Both regions uphold parallel maritime vision. Indonesia through its global maritime fulcrum, and Africa through its Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050. Both recognize a simple truth: prosperity and security at sea are inseparable. Yet despite this converging vision, cooperation remains limited, mostly diplomatic and not operational. We meet in conferences, we sign communiques, but we have yet to translate our vision into permanent working institution. Our challenge, therefore, is to transform shared vision into shared institution to ensure that the Indian Ocean become not a boundary, but a bridge of cooperation between our continents. My second point about the infrastructure gaps and government deficit. Maritime infrastructure is the backbone of regional connectivity, yet both Indonesia and Africa faces major gaps. Indonesia has more than 2,400 ports, but only a few, such as Tanjung Priok, Tanjung Perak, and Kuala Tanjung, function as true international hubs. Across Africa, about 90 major ports handle just 6% of global maritime trade, with average cargo dwell times of 20 days. It was 5 times the global average. Africa Revised Maritime Transport Charter 2025 and Indonesia Maritime Highway Initiative, or we call it Tol Laut, share a common mission to modernize logistics, make them efficient, and ensure inclusivity. However, both regions face similar barriers: limited investment, weak public-private partnership, and fragmented regulation. The time has come to move from parallel strategies to joint action. Together, we can co-develop port infrastructure, modernize logistic network, and expand blue economy. Also modernize logistic network and expand blue economy values chains across the Indian Ocean, not as separate regions, but as a single maritime community. My third point is maritime resource management and the blue economy. The blue economy represents our future, but sustainability must be its foundation. Illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing continues to cause global losses exceeding $23 billion each year. And in Indonesia itself, strict enforcement between 2020 to 2025 prevented losses of worth more than 30 trillion rupiahs, while Africa still loses about 11.5 billion US dollars annually. Beyond fisheries, new frontiers such as deep sea mining offer both opportunity and risk. In Namibia, projects like deep marine seabed mining and Total Energies Venue Spirit show how quickly economic ambition can test environmental ethics. Indonesia also faces similar debates over coral extraction and seabed exploration. Both regions share one dilemma: how to balance growth and preservation. The solution lies in cooperation through collaborative enforcement, shared surveillance, and real-time data exchange via mechanisms like the Information Fusion Center, Indian Ocean Region, and the Yaoundé architecture in Africa. Together, we can build a transoceanic regime of transparency and accountability, ensuring that the ocean will benefit our people, not deplete our planet. My fourth point is maritime security and geopolitical dynamics. Security at sea is the foundation upon which all maritime aspirations depend. Both our region continue to face persistent maritime threats. In the Gulf of Guinea, piracy and crew kidnapping remains a constant challenge. Off the coast of Somalia, vigilance is still required. And in Southeast Asia, particularly in the Strait of Malacca, nearly 80 incidents of armed robbery were reported in the first half of 2025. At the same time, great power competition has intensified. Foreign bases in Djibouti and tension in the South China Sea reveal how external actors continue to militarize our waters, often under the pretext of maintaining stability. Yet Indonesia and Africa still lack structured naval cooperation. This must be changed. The Indian Ocean should not be viewed as the backyard of great powers, but rather than the front yard of the global south. Regular Indonesia-Africa Coordinated Patrol could enhance maritime domain awareness, strengthen mutual trust, and demonstrate the self-reliance of developing nations in safeguarding their own waters. My fifth point, this is for the solution and policy recommendation. To translate vision into action, 5 key steps are needed. The first, establish a joint maritime cooperation framework linking IFC, IOR in Asia with the Yaoundé architecture in Africa for coordinated surveillance, information sharing, and also training. Second, invest in green port partnership, develop sustainable energy efficient and digitally managed ports. Twin port project between Tanjung Priok and Durban or Mombasa can demonstrate tangible cooperation. Third, create joint maritime academies and officer exchanges, building expertise in cybersecurity, hydrography, and autonomous vessel operation. Fourth, expand the inclusion of women and youth in maritime workplace. And today, women make up less than 2% of global seafarers, a statistic we can and must be changed. Fifth, strengthen South-South maritime diplomacy, shaping a new narrative of resilience and equality that reflect our shared interests rather than external agendas. Through this measure, we can transform dialogue into delivery and vision into institution. Next slide. Finally, we come to the action and conclusion for a shared maritime future. Distinguished colleagues, the sea between us does not divide, it unites. If Indonesia can sustain annual coordinated patrol with India, surely we can do the same with our African partners. If Africa can implement the AIM 2050 agenda, Indonesia can be its natural partner in developing port, fishery, government, and maritime education. The future of global maritime government will not decided solely in Washington or Beijing, but also in Jakarta, Nairobi, Cape Town, and Lagos. Let us act with conviction to protect our seas, to empower our people, and to build a maritime future that reflects our shared dignity, security, and sovereignty. That's all my presentation. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam, Om Santi Santi Om. Thank you very much.
All right, we launch into the audience interaction right now. I thank the fellow panelists for their wonderful briefs and presentation. A lot of note taking for me as well. A lot of things were new to me. So we'll take about 2 to 3 questions at a time. May I request that the questions be crisp? Please tell who you are and who you are directing the question to. And we'll take 3 questions. Yes, yes, please. The one in, yeah, that's right.
Hello. Good morning. Good afternoon to the panel. Good afternoon to the dignitaries. This is Athirf Pandey. I am a postgraduate from Jamia Millia Islamia. So my question is for any of the dignitaries from Africa. Since Africa and India as a country are moving and focusing on clean energy transition, so according to you, what can be the potential roles and the significance, specifically focusing on the East African countries in achieving a secure green energy transition, and what effective measure both the parties can take to build capacity and capabilities, citing the importance of critical minerals in clean energy transition? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Sir. A question to our panelists from South Africa. You see, if you really look at the countries on the East African coast, or what can be called the Western Indian Ocean, you have some countries that are small island developing states like Comoros, Mauritius, Seychelles, and also La Réunion, which really brings France into the picture. And then you have middle-sized countries like Tanzania and Kenya. But South Africa, in some ways, is of course a BRICS nation, and really is also coming into the category of wanting to develop nuclear power. So how should be the difference in approach of India to all these countries? And is there clearly a one-fits-all size is not going to work in this? And the other question, sir, I'll add to this is many of these countries are Commonwealth countries, which include South Africa. So I mean, how does this common Commonwealth link, including the English language and common governance systems and heritage, how would that be a unifying force for these countries with India? Thank you, sir.
If any student, yep, yes, please.
Jain sir, myself Rudranarayan, student of Rashtraksha University. My question is from Captain Mark Lane sir. As the Indo-Pacific becoming the world's strategic and economic center, how does South Africa view its role in shaping a rule-based maritime order that connect Africa's western seaboard with the Indo-Pacific, especially amid increasing extra-regional competition? Thank you.
All right, we'll take one more. We'll take one more, then we'll move on to the answers.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Group Captain Akshay Saxena. My question is both for Admiral Rajkumar and JS Division. This is regarding the joint ops anti-piracy operations between Navy and the Air Force, which we have done one of the operations like for the rescue of MV Royan. Since I was part of the planning and executing it as Captain of C-17. So there's a difference in wherein the Navy operates and how the Air Force operates. So during this operation, it was sort of covert mission which has come out into the open domain now. We flew over countries without informing them, not even India. So now with the collaboration as such now, in case of the future missions, swift operations which you require like that, I want to check whether MEA is of the opinion to inform the countries, or we need to, in case we need to wait, then it will be too late.
Do we have Mr. Kureja Misheni online? Is he there?
Yes, I am.
All right. So the first question that was on energy transition and the role of critical minerals, may we have views from Mr. Kureja Misheni, if he's there, please? He's not there. Mark, would you like to speak on? Yeah. No, he's not there. So, Mark, in the meantime, we can come on to the second question, which was on the BRICS nation and how would the, how would India approach different nations?
Okay. Thank you for really interesting questions. I'm going to take that question about BRICS and also the Indo-Pacific and South Africa's role. I'm going to take them together because I think the answer lies in the combined answer. So South Africa sees itself very clearly as part of the global South and also as non-aligned. So from that perspective, it has the idea that these very big fora can be used to drive the narrative. So for instance, when South Africa was the chair of IHORA, it drove the narrative towards capacity building and coordination, etc. So similarly, in BRICS, South Africa has been a leading nation in terms of trying to push to expand the BRICS footprint in order to maybe reflect the global South and the way that the global South then interacts with the rest of the world. So for India, being part of BRICS, I think that is your stepping stone into how to coordinate and work with South Africa and work with Africa. Because in the meantime, we also know that other nations have joined BRICS. So we've got BRICS Plus, and we've got, for instance, Ethiopia as part of that as well. So as part of the African continent where South Africa normally plays a really big role, that is your footprint into Africa. And I think when BRICS was created and when South Africa was added to BRICS, it was to create that footprint or whole foothold into Africa, which can link to the rest of Africa. So from a perspective of BRICS, I think that is the way India should approach that. And then when one talks about the rules-based order and how South Africa can use its role there, I think it's similar to that. South Africa uses all its positions in these multiple fora to drive the narrative towards non-alignment, and you can see it in most of its actions as it goes along.
So I think Captain Mark has covered both question 2 and 3 together. We come to the question from oh yes, okay. We couldn't see that. All right. Over to you, Mr. Kiroja Misheni, on a question related to energy transition, the role of critical minerals, and how that convergence challenges could be contended with.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I would say that for the African states, and specifically Eastern Africa as a question was directed, I would say that because most of those countries are technologically at startup position, we actually at a very good position, because countries will not be reinventing the wheel. And therefore, as they advance, they'll be looking upon countries that are a lot more advanced, that have already adopted greener technologies, as opposed to, for example, if technologies that were before, like, will not be, for example, go back to using coal and all that, but we'll be looking more and more into greener energy solutions. And what we are seeing today is a lot of efforts being done, especially onto solar energy. And also, you can see, as was said earlier in the presentation, African states have the largest potential for solar. So therefore, that is something that actually will play a big part as we move towards, when it comes to sort of like the kind of technology that the countries will adopt. So in Africa at the moment, there's a lot of campaigns also to adopt green energies, and I would want to say that we are in quite a good, we are in a good trajectory as far as that is concerned. So, and then I think with regards to energy, for example, if you're looking at oil and all that, Africa has to move with the times. So, we're seeing, of course, a lot of especially like e-vehicles and all that. So, again, we'll have to just follow the trend, and also focus more on the new technologies as we move forward. I hope that covers what the questionnaire wanted to know.
Thank you, Mr. Misheni. I also have Captain Mark, who's going to add a bit on the question number 2, which related to the Commonwealth countries and how to unify them and its relevance.
Thank you, Admiral. Yes, there was a question on the Commonwealth and the way how we share, for instance, language, and also the way our governments work, etc. from that. I think one also needs to understand that the maritime domain, especially navies, work very well in that sphere, because one of the things that unify us is the way we work with our operations, and the way that it is general across the world almost. And that is why it's important that when navies work together, that we do this interoperability. So for me, the Commonwealth is something that we can use and not reinvent the wheel, but use that common factors that unite us. And I think when India talks about the Commonwealth, or how to work with other navies and other nations, that is a starting point that should be a good starting point, a good foothold in order to work together in the future.
I'll give a few. Thank you, Mark. So we come to the question that Group Captain Akshay said, talked about the joint ops piracy where the Air Force and the Navy cooperated. So, you know, not to try and sound immodest, but the navies have been, the Indian Navy and many other navies operate on the high seas, international waters, international airspace quite regularly. And whenever there is an incident or there is a problem that needs to be reacted to quickly, I can assure you I've been Principal Director Naval Operations. On a Sunday, we were able to send a PATI across to off the northern part of Philippines to look for survivors of a sunken ship. And this was done on a Sunday. So in order to obtain the approvals of the DA for overflights, etc., all was done. This mechanism really works very, very fast when it has to. And when there are standard operating procedures being employed for any exercises or multilateral engagements, the processes are well in place. So while you may have certain views, we can discuss it later on as well, but there is enough cooperation, there are enough mechanisms and standard operating procedures for the operation of for the aircraft and the ships. There are a few things that Ms. Sayavi has to add, and I'll hand over to her.
Thanks for the question. Actually, in order to have a successful operation, you need to have information sharing. However, there is a lot of secrecy involved because it has to be a successful operation. So if we are going to go out and disclose a lot of details, it will not work. But the way the SOPs that our moderator has already talked about, they have been working very successfully. And in fact, I wanted to add, and I mentioned it in my presentation also, that we have this Anti-Piracy Act, which gives legal finish. And even Mr. Kiruja Micheni talked about legal finish a lot because we have completed the entire cycle of information sharing and coordination, everything, until we reach the last mile of legal finish.
Thank you. So we've got just about 6 minutes for this part to end. We can take 2 more questions. Let me just, yeah, at the back, I think the one with the beard, sorry. Yeah, that's right. You. Yes, I'm referring to you, the one, the white shirt.
Jain sir, my name is Atish Kumar Saroj. I am research scholar in defense and strategic studies from University of Allahabad. In today's 21st century, when the world has rapidly entered the age of artificial intelligence, and we talk about the blue economy, but piracy still remains a big challenge. I think its roots lie in poverty, lack of education, and limited access to technology. So my question is, can we end piracy directly communicating with the local people, spreading awareness among them, and providing better education, healthcare, and affordable technology? Thank you. Jai Hind.
Yeah, thank you for a really interesting question. You will recall from when I presented that I said that insecurity at sea cannot be taken away from insecurity at land. They are linked. So in order to sort out the problems at sea, we really need to look at the problems that are happening on land. And Somalia is a good example in terms of what happened on land and then spilled over into the ocean. So the point here is we have to focus, and I think the UN with the UN ODC and many other agencies have really started focusing on that. And when we were at the height of piracy and we were getting towards trying to solve piracy, the fact that we positioned ships offshore just suppressed that part of it. It didn't suppress the origins of piracy. And therefore, when we look at what the UN and other agencies have done on land, in terms of the legal finish, the prosecution, but also the education, the healthcare, etc., in Somalia, you will understand that that in itself is also part of the reason why piracy went down. It was not just about the ships at sea and not just about the countering the piracy at sea. It had to stand taut on land. And if one is going to go that direction in terms of doing what you do at land, then you need to use the technology that's available. And part of that technology, of course, will be AI. And AI assists us in how to do our job. It doesn't do our job for us. So we can use the technology to drive us towards making the land more secure, and then that liminality will be sorted out. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think I will adding some experience from Indonesia. Actually, we have make a free of ship, call it Sinar Kudus, when it's hijacking in the Somalia, in the north part of Somalia. And at the time, we can send the flotilla consisting of fighting ship and also support ship with the marine troop on board the ship. And finally, we can make the objective free. Yeah. Also in the Malacca Strait, yeah, at the time there are so many pirates come from GAM, this organization that would like to free from Indonesia, and they're disturbing all the ships passing the Malacca Strait. And we, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, we conducting Malacca Strait Sea Patrol. Yeah. Actually, we divided the strait into two. The northern part is patrolling by Malaysia ship and also Singapore ship. And the eastern part is patrolled by Indonesian warship. We are also sending aircraft from these three countries. Yeah, they give patrol along the Strait of Malacca. When there's Southern piracy as well in the our eastern part in Sulawesi Sea, we also set up trilateral coordinated patrol among Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines Navy. Yeah. Actually, we get success from these three different places, how we combat the piracy. That's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. And just my little two-bit from an overall level. When you look at piracy, I think an important thing to understand is, which it's been explicitly said at a number of places, is that the root of piracy is not at sea, it's on the land. And this has come out a number of times over here by words such as good governance, capability development. So that must be remembered. Unless we resolve that, these things will tend to keep erupting. So with that, I think we've come to an end. Our time is running out. We won't be able to take another question.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving our panelists a big hand.
Yeah, my summing up, sorry. So summing up, this is the tough part. So I noted down a few things. Maybe I'll not get into too much of details, but keep the essentials in mind, keep the basics in mind. And one thing that comes to my mind is when we discuss the security of India, or when we discuss the security of Africa, you will find the continental focus, you will find the regional focus, you will find the national focus and relevance in it as well. And inherently, this being tied to the seas, my experience has told me that the problem elsewhere, and I think this was correctly brought out by Admiral Ashok Kumar, was that a problem happening somewhere far away can come to your shores very, very fast, extremely fast. Please, ships may travel slow compared to an aircraft, but they can cover up to 500 miles in a day. And Captain Mark Blaine, he brought out how, when we come to Africa, how Africa's peace and security architecture, I think he said, was land-focused. And Ames brought out specific initiatives to try and get the maritime security integrated into something as large as Africa as a continent. In fact, one of the objectives of AIMS 2050, as I read, was a campaign against sea blindedness. And that, I don't know how they're doing it, but that's a very interesting thing, that we need to keep educating the people to tell them how important the seas are to our daily lives. While also, moving on to the next little point that I had, that while the ends are clear through AIMS 2050, we have to take into cognizance the Agenda 2063, which has come up. We've got the Lomé Charter, and I noted in the Lomé Charter at least 2 places explicitly the AIMS 2050 was mentioned. So that brings to the point that while we've had the AIMS 2050, there have been other initiatives that have been brought about, but the relevance of AIMS remains, and that's why this has been chosen by the NMF, and quite clearly the right thing to do. A point that I thought might be worth a mention is that when we look at the ethos of greater good, being a Vishwa Bandhu, Vasudev Kutumbakam, it sounds very idealistic, but on the maritime front, this is again a point that, born out of my personal experience, is that this greater good, or say helping, assisting Africa in capability development, is not divorced from a core national interest. It is absolutely directly connected. And I'll give you an example. I remember when I was in the Defense Intelligence Agency in August 21, we used to study and put up frequent reports on Sudan, because Sudan was at the tottering edge of breaking out into a civil war. And whatever we could get inputs, we used to put it up. And I was the CSO Ops, Chief Staff Officer Operations in Western Naval Command, when in April 2023, it just blew up. And within a day, we had to put a ship there because we had to evacuate Indians. And this had to be done on a war footing, entering into a combat zone with all the problems that come with it. So it doesn't take time for a problem somewhere to hit you very, very hard, very, very quickly. Similarly, movement of Indians, students from the conflict zone between Russia and Ukraine. So the constant theme has been capacity building and capability enhancement. And if you get that right, I think your strategy can fall into place. And this is one of the core reasons why the Navy made the mission-based deployment in 2017. In fact, again, being a little immodest, the architects of there are right in front of me. It all happened during the time when we realized that if you put a ship at the right place, you can react. You don't have to, again, steam for another 48 hours or 72 hours to get there. You're pretty much there to give immediate assistance. And that happened with Sri Lanka. I think that happened with Myanmar, a couple of places immediately, and that vindicated why it is important for the Navy to be present. It was very heartening for all of us to hear from Ms. Sayavi about a slew of initiatives in mission mode and the outcome orientation ethos that the ME has brought into, especially, I think, if I remember in the concept note, so you put out do the doing, you've got to get things done, and that's the most important part. Of course, the problem of converting that spirit of collaboration into outcomes is not easy. Even to make an SOP for a combat, for a coordinated patrol with another country takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort of sitting together, discussing what we can do, not do, because of issues related to national sensitivities on embarking people. The Navy is not new to that, but we've matured over a number of years. Another point is, being a navigation specialist and operations specialist, MDA is never enough. The more you have of it, the more you need it, the more you need to synthesize it and get it, and all the inputs that Ms. Sayavi gave about IFC-IOR are very, very relevant. How many times she mentioned IFC-IOR, how important it is for these mechanisms to get a collated picture to what we call as a common operational picture. You must know what you're trying to do at sea and cannot be in the blind, which is where I think Africa's maritime strategy needs a fillip. Admiral Viranto covered the very, very interesting point, which we are all generally aware of the global maritime fulcrum, which he spoke of, and he touched the issues of maritime transport and infrastructure pillar of IPOI, where he talked about port and maritime transportation interaction between Indonesia and Africa. that links with logistics and port cooperation. However, a detailed agenda would need to be worked out. He also spoke about the concerns of IUU fishing. It's come out a number of times. In fact, IUU fishing is one of the contributory reasons for the piracy to come up off the Horn of Africa. So I come back to the point that translating the spirit of cooperation to maritime safeguarding, which the Admiral mentioned, is certainly important, but it is a long-haul process. It takes a lot of effort to be able to do that. So I think I've rambled on enough. I just noted down these points, tried to put them together. I'm not a patch on Admiral Chauhan, but I'm just trying to put it together right now today. And thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been wonderful to moderate this session. There are a number of things that I've learned. Thank you for your patience, for your interaction and interesting questions. I thank NMF, and I would be going out of my remit, I don't know, but I want to thank Chetali, I want to thank Saz, John. They were really the back-end workers. They helped me at every instance, not only now, but before. You're a great team. Keep the great job going, and hopefully interact more often. Thank you so much. God bless.
And just like that, the slightly absent-minded apparition from the ether is back. I'm sure you wouldn't mind joining me once again to thank our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to share another proud moment with you all by announcing the release of another publication. This one, entitled Forging Strategic Convergence, India-Indonesia Defense Partnership in the Shifting Indo-Pacific, is the outcome of a successful collaboration between three parties. To that end, I would like to invite Admiral Ashok Kumar onto the stage once more to join us for the ceremony. As I was mentioning, this book is the outcome of a successful collaboration between the Indian Embassy in Jakarta, NMF, and its MOU partner, Indo-Pacific Strategic Intelligence. I now request all the dignitaries on stage to kindly do the honors. May I now also request Admiral Ashok Kumar to present tokens of our appreciation and gratitude to all our participants for this session. We'll begin with Admiral Surya Viranto. Ms. Manpui Saivi. Captain Mark Blaine. I request the AV team to quickly flash Mr. Misheni on screen if he's available online. Otherwise, I request all our panelists to step ahead of the tables for a quick group photograph as well. Oh, I'm really sorry. Really sorry. Yes. I request Admiral Surya Viranto to kindly remain on stage. Please give a big hand to the rest of our panelists as they resume their seats in the audience.